Mr. Caruso, I'm wondering why it is that your agency is predicting that the price of oil is going to go below $57 a barrel in 2016, and then even further out, you're predicting that the price of a barrel of oil is going down to $70 a barrel by 2030. So on the one hand, America believes that we're in an energy crisis, and I think that all of us really feel that. What your projections are in your agency is by 2016, the price will be pretty much cut in half, and by 2030, it really gets even better because these are constant dollars. How can you explain that? It doesn't make any sense to people that the price of oil is going to be going down.
Well, just to start off with a point of clarification, those prices you quoted are the assumptions for the world oil price in our annual energy outlook that was released several months ago, and they are only one of a number of scenarios that we look at.
But the problem, Mr. Caruso, the problem with that is that the NHTSA, the Department of Transportation, uses those projections to then determine what the cost-benefit analysis is for increasing the fuel economy standards for the vehicles that we have to drive in 2016 and 2020 and 2030. So if you give them that number, then the cost-benefit, of course, is much lower in terms of the benefit to America. The higher the prices, if you were projecting $4 a gallon or $5 a gallon, well, then NHTSA is free to increase by 5 or 6 or 7 miles per gallon the efficiency of the vehicles by 2020 or 2030. So your number is very relevant because it goes right to the question of the pressure which is going to be applied to the wilderness areas in the United States. The more efficient the vehicles, we put 70% of all oil we consume in vehicles, is the less pressure there is to drill in pristine wilderness areas. So your projection is, I think, way off. I don't think it's even remotely close to where the price of oil is going to be, and it has a profound impact then on all the other decisions which are made.
Well, the point is well taken that the NHTSA does use the reference case. We do give them the high price case, which in nominal dollars goes to $180 in
Would you recommend, Mr. Caruso, that the Department of Transportation use the high case scenario in planning for what the efficiency of the vehicles that Americans drive in 2020 and 2030 should be? Or do you think that they should use $2.26 a gallon in 2016 and $2.51 in 2030 as the basis for their planning as to what the efficiency of the vehicles that we drive should be?
Well, of course, that's obviously the prerogative of NHTSA, but we're on the higher price path right now. If you were to ask me today what would I use, I would use the higher price.
You would use the higher price, but NHTSA doesn't. NHTSA has to use your lower price. So I would recommend to the Bush administration that they change this formula and that they not use this low cost for per gallon of gasoline as the basis for the fuel economy standards for the vehicles which we drive. Let me just go down. Yes or no, Mr. Semensky, should they use a high cost, or do you think 26 per gallon in 2016 is a good way for America to plan the efficiency of our vehicles?
Well, Mr. Chairman, my experience with forecasting is that it hasn't worked out all that well. So I would suggest...
No, as a nation,
right,
what would you plan for?
I would think looking at a range would make a lot of sense.
Now, what would you plan for if you were the government? Would you plan for $2.26 a gallon in current dollars in 2016 and $2.51 in 2030, or would you plan for $4 a gallon in terms of what our automotive fleet should average?
If I were making this as a policy decision, I would plan for the worst.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jaffe, what would you plan for? Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Manning, what would you plan for? Thank you. You would plan for?
Yeah, probably for the worst.
The worst. And Ms. Harbert, what would you plan for if you were the Bush administration right now using what the projected price for gasoline for consumers would be in 2016 and 2030?
But you know, it's a little more complicated than that because you have to affix the mandates that you're going to impose with technology availability. You have to introduce when is the technology going to be available.
I understand that. What would you plan for? You're the Chamber of Commerce. You're planning. The Chamber of Commerce is planning for what the price for all of its members are going to be in 2016 and 2030, Ms. Hubbard. Would you plan for $2.26 a gallon for all of your members? By 2016, $2.51. Or would you recommend that the government plan that there be a much higher price and therefore adjust what the expectations are from the transportation sector?
I will note that the BP statistical outlook, which just came out, noted that they thought 105 was a fair price. That was according to BP.
$105 a barrel. Oh, so in other words, you don't think that planning for 226 makes any sense at all?
I think we have to be realistic about the prices going forward, and I don't know how exactly everybody does the different forecasting, but clearly the trend is up.
Well, your original testimony was very frightening, and now I'm asking you, do you think it makes sense for them to be projecting 226 a gallon?
I don't think we need to make our policy decisions based purely on forecasts. We need to make common sense, comprehensive solutions available that are not just based on forecasts.
I'm asking you a specific question. We put 70% of the oil into gasoline tanks. That's 70% of all oil. Do you think
no
this is
forecast
realistic?
can adequately predict why last Friday the price of oil went up $11? So forecasts are useful guideposts, but you cannot make concrete policy decisions based solely on forecasts.
If we're not going to be basically learning from what is going on right now in our economy with these high prices, the testimony about India, about China, about all the other pressures, and turn to the transportation sector and solve the problem, then I'm afraid that the Chamber of Commerce in 2016 and 2030 is going to be ravaged by prices that will be $6 and $7 and $8 a gallon. It's because it's surely not going back down to $2.26 a gallon in 2016 in current dollars. Okay, that just is not going to happen. And I know you don't want
violent agreement that.
I know, but I wish that we could get some agreement in terms of how high then the fuel economy standard should go in order to get that result. And by the way, your price projection per barrel of oil is higher than EIA is projecting, $105 a barrel. They have it lower than that in the out years. Okay, so again, this is a big problem that we have in terms of what the Bush administration continues to propose in the long run for what we have to do as a society in order to protect ourselves. My time has expired. Let me turn and recognize the gentleman from Arizona, and I will be generous to him in his time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Szymanski, I want to begin with you. I have listened carefully to your testimony, and you stated that we are not running out of oil. You said that we need to look at what's out there and where the resource is on the acres that are available. And then you talked about the importance of being able to get to those resources. And you said that if the resource is on lands that are essentially locked up, those are the lands that need to be released. I take it then that you believe that there are lands where we have locked up the supply and cannot get to them at the current time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You also said, and I thought it was important, that we may be reaching a point where we have a problem getting to the acres where the supplies are. Are there some that you can identify?
Yes, sir. We know that there is natural gas off of the coast of Florida. It's already been discovered, and it's not being produced because of environmental concerns that seem to me to be overreacting.
The last legislation that failed on that issue, if I'm correct, proposed that we would not allow a natural gas well to be closer than 50 miles from the shore, and that was found to be objectionable because of site pollution. Do you happen to believe that you can see 50 miles out into the ocean and see an oil rig?
It actually gets worse than that. The Cuban government will be drilling closer to the shore of Florida than the United States will be drilling.
So that's not an urban myth, that's a fact?
That is a fact.
There is concern about environmental concerns, and I think every witness acknowledged those. I would certainly acknowledge those. Do you know what happens at a natural gas rig where there is a leak, and have there been any leaks at natural gas rigs recently?
Well, this is one of the factors that pains me when I think about this is in talking with a county representative, elected county representative that I've been friends with for years in the Tallahassee area. I said, can you convince your constituents to think about looking at this gas field? You're going to need it in Florida. We have a power problem, as Amy mentioned. We could very easily have electricity shortages 3, 4, or 5 years from now. Natural gas is going to be the only way to do that. Natural gas is clean. If you do have a spill, it's not going to foul the beaches in Florida. The pipelines could come in underground. Nobody would see them. And yet the reaction of his constituents seems to be that they're afraid it's going to hurt the tourism industry. And I'm frankly more concerned that the tourism industry will be hurt by brownouts in Florida than it's going to be hurt by drilling the gas that we know is already there.
Ms. Harbart said that she thought that if we explored the Outer Continental Shelf, went after the oil and natural gas there, we would have a supply of 35 additional years, I believe, just in natural gas. I'll ask her in just a moment. Do you agree with that the supplies are in that neighborhood?
That we need to get from...
That we could get from the Outer Continental Shelf.
Yeah, those numbers, Guy Caruso will have. Those are the people at EIA, but it's substantial. And let me just make one quick comment on that. The idea that it's only a small proportion of our energy needs when you look at it over an annual basis or over a period of time, I think is really is missing the whole point. I get paid every 2 weeks, and frankly. I don't, and one of my paychecks is only is a small proportion of my annual income, but I don't want to give up one of those paychecks, and I don't think other people do.
I'm running out of time. I want to get to Ms. Harbert. Ms. Harbert, give me the statistic again, because I'd like to know it.
And I'll answer your other question. The human eye can see 16 miles, so that's how far you can
Less
see.
than a third of what we're talking about.
Right. According to the Minerals Management Service, we have 139 billion barrels of undiscovered oil reserves in this country. Of that 139, 86 are in the Outer Continental Shelf, which means that 62% of the nation's resources for oil are in the Outer Continental Shelf.
And they are currently prohibited
80% of that is off limits for exploration and production.
And that's
And that I'm just talking about oil. The other ones that you were talking about were gas, but that's just oil.
That's just oil. That does not include natural gas. Do you have figures on natural gas?
I can get those for the record.
Okay. So obviously we have a huge supply in the Outer Continental Shelf, which we could be going after and increase our supply for a substantial period of time, but we have politically decided not to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct, and our friendly neighbors to the north and to south also have significant supplies to increase our North American energy security.
And we're just talking about oil. There's natural gas on top of that?
Yes.
Okay, the numbers I have on natural gas show 287.82 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. That's just in the lower 48 in the Outer Continental Shelf. I want to switch to oil shale. The United States Congress, the House, just less than a year ago, put a moratorium on oil shale. The chairman mentioned that he thought the predicted supply of oil shale was in the neighborhood of 1 trillion barrels of oil shale in place. I've heard a figure as high as 1.8 trillion. Can you tell us about the available oil we could get from oil shale?
There's a tremendous potential in the Midwest, but unless we actually have an incentive out there for the companies that are out there to develop the technology to actually be able to produce this even more cleanly and better, without an opportunity to explore, there is no opportunity to develop the technology. There are several companies, including Shell, that are out there that have developed the technology to extract 3 times the size of Saudi Arabia's resources out of that area. But if you can't open it up, who's going to develop the technology, which is hugely expensive to do this in an environmentally sustainable way? We have got to incentivize our way out of this crisis,
and
not penalize and put things off limits.
And currently that's a political decision. Again, we've put a political moratorium on the production of oil shale.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Caruso, would you advise the next administration that as they set out to put together their energy policy, whether it be Senator McCain or Senator Obama, would you recommend that they do that behind closed doors, in secret, or do you think it should be a transparent, open policy?
Well, I'm head of a statistical agency, and we believe in transparency and openness, so certainly think that works best.
Do you think that that in part and parcel is a problem with the American public when as everyone is working towards solutions, that when you do things behind closed doors in the dark of night, it seems to the American people, especially when you come from a background of oil yourself, that somehow, not you personally, but the Vice President, that somehow these things aren't transparent?
I'm obviously not familiar with.
Is there anyone on the panel who doesn't believe that we shouldn't have a more open and transparent policy with respect to our energy policy?
I would just like to add to that there is a tremendous amount of disinformation that goes out to the public on the factual, indisputable technicalities of oil and gas, and that to the extent that people feel the need to fulfill what they think their constituencies want to hear, and they go on CNN and tell the public something that is factually incorrect, that makes the work of everybody on this panel 10 times harder, because we have to spend a tremendous amount of time publishing documents that put out factual things about what car technology is available, about how many lands are available for drilling.
We just received some very good testimony. I thank the panelists, et cetera, and one of them in talking about this was going through the notion that you can't explain why oil, went up $11 a barrel. I think it was Herbert who said that. Are the laws of supply and demand suspended? And isn't it the fact that the dark markets have taken over in terms of speculation? The speculation, part and parcel of what's driving the cost of oil up artificially, so that we can't, from a policy perspective, get our arms around this?
If I could try a quick answer to that, the $11 move that we had last week, two of the factors that played into that were, one, a outage on a significant natural gas pipeline in Australia that has raised the demand for distillate fuels in that country to keep their mines open, so the metals mines.
Funny thing is, my constituents, when I go back home and talk to them, they say, how is it that something happens and then immediately the next day the prices go up in gasoline or in any kind, and yet when things happen where they say demand is less and things are going, the prices stay the same, they don't come down. Are the laws of supply and demand suspended, and is the industry at the whim of speculators, especially those that are unregulated and unseen, with the capability of driving the marketplace up artificially? Yes or no? Do you think that that's the case? Is that a problem or not?
Yes, I think it's a problem. We're in a bubble mania in the market.
Good, yes. So what about you, Mr.?
Well, I don't think it's one thing, probably. I think speculation is a part of the problem. Increased demand is part of the problem. The weak dollar.
Speculation have any role in this?
We have a very, very tight market between supply and demand. And to the extent that our economy, the receding dollar, et cetera, are exacerbating that, should we
regulate the dark markets?
If you look at speculation, it's adding volatility into the market, but it would do nothing to turn around and reduce and reverse the price increase.
We want the transparency that everybody...
We want the markets to clear and to function, because otherwise it'll be even less orderly. And
we had that in the 70s. Should we look into the dark markets?
Well, what we need to do...
Should they be regulated?
No.
Should they be
are regulated. We need to look at...
Who regulates the over-the-counter market?
The Commodities Futures Exchange.
No, it doesn't.
What we really need to do is think about how much speculation and what kind of speculation it is and what are the solutions.
How can you determine that if they're unregulated? What do you think about that, Mr. Caruso?
One solution might be
Excuse me,
to have margin
Mr.
requirements.
Mr. Caruso,
that are
my time's run out. What do you think about that? Should we be regulating these unregulated dark markets?
I think we need more information from those markets to be able to understand.
How do you get it if they're not regulated?
Well, they may need to be. And the CFTC, FTC, and Department of Justice are meeting tomorrow in their first task force meeting to look at that issue.
After more than 2.5 years of our pleading that they do so, but it still doesn't answer the question of the dark markets and their ability to be unregulated and to speculate on what's happening and drive these costs up. People in my district call that economic terrorism. It's something we ought to be making sure that the Justice Department is involved in.
And Mr. Larson, if I may, that just all this stuff's just another reminder that we need to get off of oil. I mean, this stuff is, it's not sustainable the way the markets are working or where it's located. We just need to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels.
I agree wholeheartedly, but in the meantime, as my grandfather would say, trust everyone but cut the cards. We not only need to cut the cards, we need a new deal here.
We also need to think more flexibly about how and when we use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and the IEA stockpiling system. This administration, unlike previous administrations, has said that the SPR is off the books except for national war emergencies. And we are not using a tool that we had that was used successfully by the Clinton administration to cap speculators out of the market. So we haven't looked at that. We haven't debated it. I would guess from my long experience and watching the way, as Adam put it, market sentiment is determined, that if the markets felt that some player with strategic stocks was going to come in and possibly make a release, they'd be a little less confident about buying the market long.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the hearing, and I think there's been some good information come out of it. Mrs. Harbert, I especially appreciate your testimony, and I keep hearing from Mr. Emanuel that we need to stop using oil, natural gas, and coal, I think he said, are sort of the evil energy sources of the United States, and that we need to wean ourselves off of those sources. My question for you and for Mr. Caruso is, what's the practicality of that? What do you replace them with? And how soon could you do that? No, I'm asking Mrs. Harbert.
For the benefit of our economy and our national security, we want to reduce our dependence on any single fuel. In this case, it happens to be oil. We do need a diverse supply. However, it is unrealistic to think that we will not have hydrocarbons as a very large part of our future for the foreseeable future. And we need to figure out how to make that a stable, secure supply. We need to find new places where that exists. We want to have control over those, and they exist right here at home. And so we have to be able to use our oil, our gas, our coal responsibly. We have the technology to do that.
All right. Mr. Szymanski, we've heard a lot about the dark markets and the effect of speculators on price. About 3 years ago or so, I actually led an effort asking the Government Accountability Office to investigate those markets, and they produced a rather lengthy report and recommended some changes in those markets. And I think there's a certain element of speculation that drives up price, but I thought you made a pretty good point about why the speculators are in those markets. And it was what you were saying is that has a lot to do with the fact that we lock up most of our new resource or available resource in this country,
well,
and that it's a global market with increasing demand?
It's a concern that supplies are looking more and more limited, and demand, at least outside of the United States so far, hasn't been reacting all that much to prices. So I think that we're involved in a very painful economic experiment to try to find out what price is required to get supplies to rise and demand to go down. As far as the dark markets are concerned, let me make 3 comments. Guy attended a meeting at the Commodities Future Trading Commission yesterday. I listened very carefully to the testimony there. The CFTC is very concerned about 3 major areas: the over-the-counter trading, which doesn't have the same reporting requirements; swaps dealers, where who is defined as speculators versus non-speculators are at issue; and foreign exchanges, where some of the contracts traded on the NYMEX here in America are also traded overseas. The staff at the CFTC has actually looked into a number of these things, and so far, from the data that they have, they don't think that there are big issues there. I'm all in favor of switching the light on the dark markets.
You bet.
The people I work with on the trading desk are all in favor of transparency. I don't think there'll be a monster in the room when the light goes on.
All right. Then if that's the case, then it really does get back to supply and demand curve. Now, I don't know about anybody else. I drive a hybrid here, and I drive a hybrid back in Oregon. I've increased my mileage by 60% in Oregon and doubled it here. Not everybody has the luxury of investing in a hybrid. I don't know how many of you shop at Walmart. I get in there about once a week back in my hometown. There are a lot of Walmart moms and a lot of diesel driving, truck driving dads. They're having a hell of a time making ends meet. And that's the case. And Mr. Manuel, I've heard, from the Sierra Club on this issue of no new drilling anywhere. It won't help us anyhow. And I got to tell you, I'm coming down more on the side that says access to proven reserves in America creates American jobs, American energy, and it will have an effect on price over time. So I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you, but it wouldn't be the first time, because I know your group doesn't want us to cut any trees in the national forest either, so we let them burn. But that's another subject for another day. But I want to get back to this issue, Mr. Szymanski. If Congress were to act to open up the OCS or ANWR or shales or tar sands, if we were just to pass a law, knowing that we wouldn't actually extract those resources for 10 or 20 years, do you think the simple act of Congress saying we've changed America's energy policy would have an effect on markets and speculators?
Yes, sir, I do. I think that, as I said during the course of my first remarks, it's the sentiment that matters. Right now, everybody in the oil markets is making this assumption that demand isn't going to go down and supply is going to be fixed. If we can change that thinking, and changing that thinking would be, look, we're going to open up the Outer Continental Shelf. We're going to start building nuclear power plants 5 a year for the next 20 years, and we're going to pass even stricter fuel efficiency standards on automobiles than we did before, and even do things like the light bulbs. I mean, that's not the wrong thing to do. That's like one of the small steps
we did that.
We have to take all of these small steps, and we have to do it all at the same time.
Yeah, it seems to me that the data show that Americans need to conserve, but even when we conserve at a rate greater than any time since World War II, reducing our consumption of oil during our driving, according to the statistics, I believe that's correct, it's not having the effect it used to have.
Well, it is beginning to work here. I mean,
it's killing us here.
The statistics are that demand is down 4% on a year-over-year basis. Americans are buying smaller cars. They're driving miles.
They're not going to their kids' away games anymore because they can't afford the gas. They're showing up at work 2 hours early so they can carpool with their spouse. They're making tough decisions in their lives, and that's I want people to conserve, but I don't. Mr. Chairman, everybody's gone at least a minute and a half over. So
you're at 1 minute and 6 right now, and
you were 2:23.
I'm saying I did not say a word. I just tapped lightly to give you a notice that you're away.
I'm worried about that other hand of yours,
but I did not,
with that club thing on it.
Well, I would give my right arm to be able to say what I really want to say right now, but you're over, and I'm just tapping lightly.
I'll give up.
2:44. No, I'm just.
Well, I was just, I don't know where I was going with it. I'll quit at that.
If everyone in the country telecommuted 1 day a week, starting tomorrow, we would save 20% of our oil use.
And that's great, except I represent a district that's 70,000 square miles where you don't pull a horse trailer with a Prius. I own a Prius. You can't drive a horse.
Telecommute. In other words, you work from home.
Ma'am,
1 day.
Ma'am, you ever been on a cattle ranch? A lot of them work for home. You still got to haul the hay out to the field. You got to bring it back. You're on a wheat ranch. You still got to run the tractor. Fertilizer costs.
I'm just talking about commuters.
We're all representing people we represent. And I don't disagree, and I've supported telecommuting efforts and funding in my district. I think it's wonderful, but I'm saying there are a lot of other folks out there in real America that can't do that. Their costs of commuting now are higher than their mortgage costs. And they lived in a different town because the housing costs were cheaper. These are real people going upside down in this country, and we don't want to do anything about it here, and that's wrong.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Hall.
Thank you. And my friend, Mr. Walton, I think we do want to do something about it. I certainly do, and I think all of us do here. And there's certainly areas, as the witnesses have reminded us, of agreement and areas of overlap, and I think we should work as fast and as hard as we can on those. So the EIA has run a lot of assessments about oil prices based on projected supply and demand along a base case, and I'd just like to ask Mr. Caruso, has EIA run any estimates incorporating an assumption that America's auto fleet will be significantly more efficient by 2030?
We have in the latest outlook incorporated the new laws, so we have about a 40% increase in miles per gallon in this 2008 outlook. And we haven't specifically run a scenario where we took a much larger increase, but we have done improved technology cases which try to simulate that. So there are about 30 different cases in our long-term outlook that try to simulate different policy changes and economic conditions.
Thank you very much, and that's good. And I've noticed that every state that's had, for instance, a renewable energy standard, including Texas, where our president signed one for 10% RES when, as president of the United States, as governor, I should say, governor of Texas, he signed one. As president, he's been unwilling to sign one for the whole country. But the state of Texas exceeded their 10% and has eclipsed California now as the largest installed wind capacity state in the country. So there is some evidence that when you put a goal out there, Americans exceed it, be it with electricity or with transportation fuels or vehicles. Indeed, the Chevy Volt, I was just reading, which will be coming out next year or the year after that, will basically have it's an electric car that will have a internal combustion engine for the purpose only of charging the batteries, the lithium-ion battery bank, which will drive the vehicle. And they say on long-distance travel, it's a commuter vehicle which will run on electric for commuter distances 100 miles or less. On intercity or long-distance travel, it will average 150 miles per gallon, based on technology they have that they're bringing to market in the next couple of years. Toyota just announced, I think yesterday or the day before, a car that they are planning to release that will get 500 miles to the gallon. So I think we're going to see an exponential growth in efficiency as well as in substitute power for transportation, which is a good thing because we need the liquid fuels for air travel for considerably longer time, I think, as we figure out how else we might be able to fly. If the overall market was made up, say, 50% hybrids, can you theorize what that might do to consumption?
Not off the top of my head. I know our base case has 45% new car sales of alternatively fueled vehicles in 2030. But that is a ramp up.
Right.
So it takes a long time, as you alluded.
People wear out their cars, and it takes a while before they buy a car.
But certainly that calculation could be made if you would. I could supply that for the record.
We've done the calculation that if starting in 2015 all new cars got 50 miles to the gallon, it would save 6.7 million barrels a day at the current rate of car turnover.
Did you see the article, I think it was in the New York Times, about the impact on different areas of the country of fuel prices? For instance, the southern and more rural districts where trucks are in heavier use and they tend to be old and very inefficient. It had a map with different colors and showed it was really interesting, and it made me think that perhaps we should be trying to help those states and those districts where people have historically driven trucks for work and for transportation and are driving ones that get less than 10 miles per gallon and older models and can't afford to upgrade to a new hybrid truck that shuts down half the 8 cylinders when it's on a straightaway at a constant speed, which are being made currently by GM and Ford in this country. Anyway, I just wanted to make a comment about substitutability, which I think you mentioned, Ms. Jaffe. When I was in Israel, I was pleased to learn about a company there that's making electric vehicles and interchangeable batteries, and their concept is you pull into a service station, and rather than charging your battery, they just take one out and put another newly charged one in, hook up the wires, and you drive away in a few seconds, as opposed to taking a few minutes to recharge or refill your tank with fuel. And wondering if anybody's considered this sort of thing, at least in commuter areas of the United States.
One of the things I think the Israeli government said when they announced that program was that they really feel that they're sort of meeting global need, that they have a small country and it's easy for Israeli commuters to do that because they don't drive more than 2 hours, from one end of the country to the other 3 hours. But that would have applications in large cities. It would have a great application in Manhattan, great application in a place like Singapore, or even in some other larger U.S. cities where you have a very dense population that has a limited geographic area that they drive. We actually did the calculation back when gasoline prices were $3, that if today I could plug in my car, because in Houston I live what we call inside the loop, and I really never go more than 10 or 15 miles a day, I could have spent 2 cents a mile if I could have plugged my car into my house and not bought gasoline versus, say, 17 cents a mile at that time. So there really is an advantage, and there is this advantage for us in terms of national security. If you can imagine our either getting cut off by the Middle East or having a major hurricane in the Gulf Coast that knocked out refining, and we suddenly had a temporary hiatus in the ability to have enough gasoline, if some Americans could plug in, then some people would be able to drive without recourse to gasoline, then the need for rationing or the kinds of things we saw in 73 would be greatly eased.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the panelists for being here today. And when I look at the energy issues, I talk to people on this panel, other members of Congress on both sides. I think we all agree that when we look at some comprehensive energy plan to reduce prices, to lessen the emissions in the world, we have to look at it from a multi-pronged approach, many different approaches. It's not just one thing. And, one of the things we need to lessen our dependence on foreign oil. We need to maybe use less oil and gas. That's true. We need to look at alternative energy sources, wind, solar, nuclear. All those things are very, very important. I think a lot of people, Ms. Harbert even talked about that. Others have talked about that on this panel. But right now we are getting a lot of our, and the technological advances aren't in place right now where we can just shoot the horse on gas and oil right now and jump on another horse right now. And so I guess I'll ask Mr. Manuel, you said that one of the things you said that really disturbed me, that I think was less than truthful, is that we don't have any gas and oil here to explore here in the United States. You said that. And I can tell you right now, I got a thing here and I'll give it to you, but we've got, just in the offshore, in Pacific offshore, we got 10 billion barrels of oil we could get here in our own backyard. We also got 18 trillion cubic feet of gas. That's in the Pacific. Offshore Alaska, we've got 27 billion barrels of oil that we could get, and we got 132 trillion cubic feet of gas. On the Atlantic offshore, we got 4 billion barrels of oil and 37 trillion cubic feet of gas. Offshore Gulf, we've got deep water, 45 billion barrels of oil, 233 trillion cubic feet of gas. And the lower 48, inaccessible, and these are inaccessible. Government says it's against the law to do. We have 20 billion barrels of oil in the lower 48 onshore and 162 trillion cubic feet of gas. And what I'm saying is, until we develop the technologies that we can do other things, why do you think it's so wrong to get some in our own backyard? Do you think you prefer that we go to the Mideast to get it or outside this country? Why is it so wrong to get it here while we are developing those technologies so we can get prices down?
Well, just to point out, I said that the U.S. has about 2 to 3% of the world's proven oil reserves. I didn't say we had none. And in the contrary, I pointed out that we've opened up thousands and thousands, millions of acres to new oil and gas drilling in the last 30, 35 years. And if you look at just this past year, we've had the Minerals Management Services had 2 very large lease sales, one in the Chukchi Sea, one in the central Gulf of Mexico. So there's not a question of access. We have all these leases that have been sold to oil and gas companies that aren't being used.
These are off limits, what I just said. They're off limits.
No, I know, but the point is the stuff that's open now is not being utilized. And we don't think, and again, if you look at the MMS figures, we think that 80% of the resources that are available offshore are in areas that are already opened. Most of the oil and gas found in the United States is in the central and western Gulf of Mexico. That's where the companies want to go. That area's been open for 20, 30 years.
You see anything wrong with going in these areas that I mentioned?
Well, I do. I don't think we should open up any new areas for new offshore drilling.
So you don't think it's a good idea to get more at home in our own backyard?
We don't think it'll do any.
Elsewhere?
We don't think it'll make any difference on the price of a gallon of gas. Because again, we've tried that. The lease sale that happened in the Chukchi, that didn't drop the price of a gallon of gas. When we opened the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System in 1975, 3 years later, the Shah of Iran fell and Iranian oil became off the market. Our prices went sky high, even though we'd opened up the largest oil field in the United States. There's no historical data to show that opening up individual fields in the United States has had any impact on the price of gas.
You wouldn't agree that this is part of the puzzle, though, when we look at multiple issues that we have to look at to address our energy issue? You don't think this is part of the puzzle to address that as we develop the technologies where we can move to other types of energy? You don't think that we should do that?
Well, we acknowledge that it's going to take us a while to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels, but there's plenty of areas that are opened right now that allow us to do that.
It's not adequate.
Well, we think that's the way to go for a variety of reasons: environmental damage to these areas, but also the global warming, greenhouse gas emissions. We think the better path for our country is a future of clean energy sources, renewables, energy efficiency, fuel economy. That would save more oil and gas than thought to be off of these areas.
Is that the mission of the Sierra Club, to lessen our dependence on oil and coal, and also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? That's your primary purpose?
Our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and wean ourselves off of fossil fuels.
Okay. Do you support nuclear power?
No, we don't right now because of the subsidies.
It has no emissions. Do you know that?
Well, it's got a lot of nuclear waste, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
And so you don't support nuclear power at all?
No, we don't.
Did a former member of your group, I read, supports the use of nuclear power?
Pardon me?
Did someone in your organization that was in your organization that's not in your organization now support nuclear?
Well, I can't comment for former members of the Sierra Club.
Well, he does. Do you think, Ms. Hulbert, could you tell us what again, just very quickly, what do you think we should do? I mean, we need to look at this from multiple approaches. We are going to try to wean ourselves off gas and oil. We probably will move towards that direction with technology as technology develops. But what do you think we should do in the meantime?
We need to responsibly exploit the resources we have here at home, play the home team, play to our advantages. We are investing right now, less in research and development than we did after the Arab oil embargo. We have to get serious and invest in advanced technologies. We have to streamline permitting for energy infrastructure, and that includes new nuclear plants so that it's emissions free, and we've got secure, available, local supplies of nuclear energy.
Do you believe that what Mr. Manuel said about we already have enough going on? What I mentioned earlier is we don't even need to go into this because we have plenty already here in the United States to address this, and that while we are in this gap looking for...
Well, energy demand is forecasted to go up by 30% in this country. We don't have the same amount of growth in production planned for this country, so there's a growing gap between supply and demand that has to be met somehow.
Okay. Also on the markets, you mentioned the speculation and all of that. There may or may not be some in the price of crude. I bet probably is a little bit. If you did regulate here, and we do to a certain extent some of the markets, what would keep them from, traders just trading in another country?
Gentleman can answer the question.
I think that we need to do what we can do in our own markets and with the foreign agencies that we can work with, like in London and in Dubai, where there are actually initiatives underway to cast some light on the dark market question.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the panelists. There's been some very interesting testimony today, some of it very specific, some of it very general, and I think it illuminates the issue quite a bit. One of the things that I hear are there's two real salient points. First of all, we need to work on a bipartisan basis to find reasonable solutions that will make our energy stable, our energy future stable. I think everybody agrees with that. The other one is that we need to encourage innovation to develop a stable and reliable energy future. Personally, I believe that energy efficiency is our best resource, and there was some very impressive testimony. For example, Mr. Caruso said that our current CAFE standard of 35 miles per gallon will save 2 million barrels a day. And Ms. Jaffe said that 50 miles per gallon will save 6.7 million barrels a day. What I'd like to ask Mr. Caruso, how much do you think that would affect our price of gas at the pump if we save $2 million barrels a day?
Well, we think that, as the chairman mentioned, that if we can bring consumption down, in this case 2 million barrels a day, and increase supplies, that we can see the real price of oil go down. The prices that chairman was quoting are in 2006.
Well, how much do you think that would affect the price at the pump today if we were saving 2 million barrels a day?
I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to provide that. It certainly would put downward pressure on price.
Do you have an estimate, Ms. Jaffe? I guess.
Some of it gets to the issue that Adam brought up, which is this sort of what's driving the speculative fervor. So I will say, just factually, U.S. demand for oil is down 4% this year versus last year. And part of what you're trying to do is create an atmosphere where people see that as a long-term trend line, and they start to trade oil with that mentality in mind.
Do you think 6.7 million barrel per day savings in our oil consumption would lower the price of gas substantially?
Yes, I think it would make a substantial lowering in the price.
You know, you mentioned a couple of things also that I think were interesting. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, using that to reduce the speculation in the market. Do you have a specific proposal, and how effective do you think that would be?
Well, let me give you a specific example. There was a period of time, and I can't remember what the risk factor was in the market, but when Secretary Richardson did a quote-unquote test sale of the SPR, and the effect it had at the time, because prices were sort of creeping above $40 a barrel, and it spooked people in the market briefly, and prices went back down into the 30s. What happened then is every time the price would subsequently get to $39 or something like that, people would automatically, naturally assume that the SPR might be released again, and so they would take their profits at a certain number.
So this is a very effective tool that's in the hands of the administration that's not being used. In fact, it's being forbidden from being used. It's been taken off the table by the administration.
By taking it off the table, the administration has not only meant that you could trade up with impunity, it's also discouraged OPEC, because if you're OPEC and you know that we might use strategic stocks, then it behooves you to raise your production because you might as well get the money. Whereas if we release the SPR, you know, the Treasury gets the money. So it's had a negative effect, in my opinion, on both the dynamic of having OPEC respond the way they did, say, in '90 by increasing their output, and it's had a negative dynamic on the sort of way speculators feel about the upside of the market.
I think you might want to be very careful about using the Strategic Petroleum Reserve just solely looking at the price alone. The obvious exceptions to using the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that the administration did not use was the strike in Venezuela. If you actually have a shortage of oil caused by something like a strike or an accident or weather, using the SPR at that time, and not only ours, but the product inventories in Europe, makes a lot of sense. Doing it for price alone, I think, takes you down a path that you might not want to go.
I would agree with that, but I'd like to add to that something. When we had Hurricane Rita Katrina, another time the administration, didn't really, strongly use the SPR. The point is, we had to borrow gasoline from European strategic stocks of gasoline. And if the outage had lasted longer, they were not going to lend to us a second time. We do not require oil companies in this country to carry a minimum inventory. That is required in Asia, and that is required in Europe. Had we have that requirement, then the buildup in prices we get every spring would be less likely to happen. Part of what causes the speculative run-up in gasoline prices in the spring is we need to attract imports because we can't manufacture to meet demand. When the companies don't carry inventory, if we have an accident like the Venezuelan strike that accidentally lowers inventories, we never catch up, and that's reflected immediately in the pump price.
Now, another thing you discussed, I like the idea, was substitutability. You compared the electricity market to the transportation market, but the way you envision substitutability applying in the transportation market, what would be the carbon footprint impact of that as compared to the current supply for the transportation market?
this is what we need to think through. We know that there's a problem in the power generation sector because we're so heavily reliant on coal. But we need to have what I call an infrastructure paradigm shift. So over time, if we bring cars that have substitutability, so we bring some cars that can work off electricity, right now we have different things. Some things in the supply stack for electricity are clean and some things aren't. But if then over time we can move our policies so that we move to things like more distributed energy, like say we had a better technology for solar rooftops, then you could plug in your car and it would be in California, I'd be plugging it in to solar, right? So we would have a transition where we can marry the two things together.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from South Dakota, Ms. Herseth Sandlin.
I thank the chairman, and I'm indebted to the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Inslee, for allowing me to take this set of questions now. Let me begin by saying that I agree with Mr. Sullivan that parts of the area of the map that he showed us that are currently inaccessible are a piece of the puzzle. And I hope that he agrees with me that biofuels production is also a piece of the puzzle. And so I would like to explore with Administrator Caruso the issue of biofuels production and the testimony that we received on April 1st of this year from executives of the big 5 oil companies. 4 of the 5 that testified acknowledged that increased biofuels production has reduced oil and gasoline prices, although they didn't agree with the magnitude. The analysis that I raised with them that I want to raise with you now comes from a March 24th article in the Wall Street Journal reported that Francisco Blanch, an analyst at Merrill Lynch, has concluded that oil and gasoline prices would be 15% higher but for the expanded production of biofuels. So my question, Mr. Caruso, is has the EIA calculated the degree to which increased biofuels production has lowered oil and gasoline prices in the United States?
We haven't done the similar analysis as you just referred to, but we did look at the 08 increment of biofuels compared with 07 and looked at what impact that may have had on gasoline prices. And our conclusion was somewhere, I think, in the 10 to 15 cents per gallon reduction in the price of gasoline that we believe can be attributed to the incremental production of corn ethanol.
So a reduction
for
from where it might otherwise be in that 1 year period.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have any plans to perform a broader analysis?
Not at this time. But
why is that?
We haven't been asked to. We don't. We try to use our resources as best we can.
Well, I would look forward to talking with the chairman at greater length about formal request in light of some of the analysis that we think currently exists that the EIA could supplement as it relates to the positive impact of increased biofuels. Now, you did say that in your testimony, what are the key reasons for your testimony that while, quote, very uncertain, unquote, you conclude that available quantities of cellulosic biofuels prior to 2022 will be insufficient to meet the new RFS targets for cellulosic biofuels, triggering both waivers and a modification of applicable volumes, such that the overall RFS target in 2022 will be reduced from 36 billion to 32.5 billion gallons. What are the key reasons for that testimony, and what level of confidence does EIA have in an analysis that's explicitly very uncertain?
Well, I would agree that we should start off by how much uncertainty there is about that technology, and that's one of the reasons we make that statement. And
so you're referring to the technology that exists?
Yes, technology and cost. The two, of course, are interrelated. And we've worked with the National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden to come up with what they think the best outcome is likely to be.
So if they're
as of when that annual energy outlook was produced,
which
early this year.
So in light
that's
of
our best judgment,
the investments and the advancements that I see in the advanced biofuels, cellulosic ethanol industry, if within the next year to 18 months it's demonstrated that the technological advancements are much further along than when you produce this study, that would be a factor that then would lead you to the conclusion that production of cellulosic biofuels will indeed meet the RFS?
Oh, definitely. We reevaluate our assumptions every year, and I think Congressman Inslee in his opening remarks mentioned a few of these areas where very significant changes can take place.
So would you be willing to provide the committee the full analytical basis for the testimony regarding the RFS as of today and the report that was issued earlier?
Certainly. We publish that every year.
Okay. One last area to explore. Ms. Jaffe, I agree with you on this administration's inflexibility as it relates to using the SPR in a more strategic manner. I met with propane marketers from South Dakota yesterday. The hedging tools that they typically use simply aren't an option for them anymore. And I know that in addition to utilizing the SPR more strategically, they actually called for higher margin requirements. And some of the other commodity folks that I represent, farmers, ranchers, grain elevators, they actually have proposed the idea of making the traders take delivery of a percentage of the commodity that they're trading. Could you comment on either of those options?
Yeah, I think that it's important to have financial clearing for the futures market for oil. I mean, the whole purpose of having a futures market for oil is to have a smooth and transparent